Hi, you're watching Maroondah Love Dialogues. I'm Norm Curry. The Love Dialogues are in part supported by a Maroondah City Council grant. What's a love dialogue? A love dialogue is speaking one, the love of self, with the love of other, connected and contributed to by unconditional love insofar as we can manage that. So it's a cycle of love itself. Today we'll be speaking with Reverend Professor Philip Hughes. Philip, thanks for coming in again.
Thank you, Norm.
Now what we've got now is probably, it's the fifth, but it's not the least significant by any means, is actually trust, is actually maintaining trust. What do you have to say about trust?
Trust is certainly really important. One of the areas of study that I have done over the years has been in relation to building stronger communities. And trust is the oil that makes communities work. It's a really important thing, and it's important at individual relationships, but it's also important in terms of the wider groups and trust in community in general. So where there is trust, people respect each other. People expect the goodwill of each other. And if you trust, then you don't have to check on everyone all the time.
That's right.
Trusting communities are communities where there are not huge walls between people, where there's not massive security systems to check everything and so on. And thus those communities are happier, they're more productive, and people feel better about those communities in general. So trust is really fundamental, I think.
We've actually been through, and still going through in fact, a situation where there's been a breakdown of trust in government, breakdown of trust in the medical system, breakdown of trust in governments. That's COVID.
To some extent we have. In other ways, in actual fact, in some respects, our level of trust has actually risen. And certainly here in Australia, I think the fact that the politicians have turned to the scientists and said, look, here's the facts, here's the people who actually will tell you what's right and wrong in this situation and how to do things. In general, that's actually increased our levels of trust and confidence a little bit more, and has helped us, certainly here in Australia, to get through the COVID epidemic. So that's been important. But I do think that trust is a particular issue in multicultural societies. Where lots of people from very different backgrounds and so on are living together. We need to learn to trust people who are different from ourselves. It's very easy to trust our close friends and those people who hold the same values, hold to the same religious beliefs, and so on. It's a little different to actually trust people who come from different backgrounds, who have somewhat different values, different ways of expressing themselves, may have different languages that they use. And so for me, one of the roles that I'm sort of trying to play in community a little bit is through the Interfaith Network, whose job is to help the understanding of people from different backgrounds, different religious backgrounds, helping us to find our common humanity, understanding the differences in the ways in which we do that, and through that building trust with each other.
Yes. So what you're implying there, and I think it's correct, is the fact that out of ignorance, trust, there is no trust if you're ignorant of all sorts of things, but particularly in the interreligious and intercultural area, ignorance of what certain symbolism means to the other person, for example, can be very challenging.
It certainly can. And there are barriers that we need to overcome. Barriers of language are most evident and most obvious. But there's so many cultural barriers too. And trust means working to overcome those and looking for the goodwill in the other person, despite the different ways in which they might express that.
We mentioned before the fact that fear is the basis for a lot of these emotional responses. Certainly fear is a basis for lack of trust.
Yes.
And there was one thing about the fear of what will happen to me. So part of the way to reinforce trust is to take your eyes off what will happen to you and look at what will happen to the other. It's also part of the unconditionality of the love.
It is. It is. So if you're really concerned about the well-being of others, that in itself will help to overcome those barriers that may exist between you and the other person.
The other, and not, because if you look at it and you say to yourself, well, what's my fear? What can they take from me? In point of fact, when you get down to the bottom line, they can't actually take anything from you. It's very unlikely that they can take anything from you by, and I'll just say with a hijab, for example, that's got nothing to do with you. It's an external thing, and if you can just trust the person to be a good Muslim, which is very good indeed, or just a good person, then a lot of that fear disappears.
Exactly. So again, it is a matter of allowing our trust to overcome those fears. Yes.
So if you were to give advice to someone and say, look, and they say to you, look, I can't trust anybody, I don't trust anybody, what would you say to them as being some of the first steps you might use to overcome your lack of trust?
I think the first step is communication.
Yes.
I think a lot of trust comes out of dialogue, out of seeking to, let's try and understand the situation. Let's try and understand those barriers, and so that we can overcome those. I do think when we're going to another country, one of the important things to do is to try and learn just a little bit, at least, of the language of the other person.
Yes.
And language is a way into culture and to background and so on. And as you begin to appreciate all of that, so trust becomes just that little bit easier.
Yes. So information, so we come back to ignorance, and if we look at our education system and the organisations that, as you said, the interfaith groups, etc., there's quite a lot of work goes into removing that ignorance, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
There's a lot of government investment in that as well.
Yes, and of course the differences in our background, people from East and West and so on, from all over the world who come together in cities in Australia, huge differences.
Yeah.
Sort of many thousands of years of culture, if you like, that's been developed, and it's not easy to overcome that.
No.
There was a book that I read a few years ago now. It was called "Why Warriors Lie Down and Die,"
Yes.
and it was about the Aboriginal people of the Yolngu. The Yolngu people in Northern Territory, and I gained some enormous insight from there of the huge differences in the ways in which the very nature of life is understood.
Yeah.
But I think that it's that sort of information that helps break down the barriers, that helps the trust to occur.
Yeah.
And through it, we actually find our common humanity.
That's right.
And we find the love and the goodwill and the respect that actually can bind us.
Yeah. And that's also achieved by actually listening, not allowing your fear and your lack of trust to rise up so that you can't hear actually what the other person's saying. And I think your example from the Aboriginal perspective is well based, because it's the failure to actually listen to what Aborigines have been saying for a long time, that there's been an alienation, and gradually, hopefully, we're building that bridge across and saying, well, we hear you and we trust you.
Yes.
We
Yes.
hear you. Yeah.
And we've got to take a few more steps in terms of then turning around some of the ways in which we act, some of the ways in which we do things. And I was deeply moved by the ceremony just recently of the senior Australian of the year, who was an Aboriginal person, and who said, we've been learning to walk in the white men's ways for 200 years now. Can you just try to meet us halfway?
That's right. Yep. Yes. Trust us and ignore the differences and trust us.
Yeah, not just ignore the differences, but actually seek to understand the differences.
Yeah. That's right. That's a better point.
Work with those differences and acknowledge our common humanity through those.
Thanks for that, Philip. You're watching Love Dialogues, and we will now have a guided meditation from Francis Cassidy.
Hello and welcome to this dialogue on trust. My name is Francis, and I am part of the Love's Dialogue team. Before we begin today's meditation, let's go back to the conversation between Norm and Philip on the meaning of trust. Trust in a relationship is having faith that our partner or someone close to us will remain loyal to us and love us through the good and bad times. To trust someone means that you can rely on them and are comfortable confiding in them because you feel safe with them. Philip believes trust is the oil that makes communities work. When there is a mutual trust between people, communities, cultures, there exists respect and goodwill. Building trust across cultures between people who meet only for short periods of time can be very challenging. For example, language can be a major barrier among other cultural differences. The big question, of course, is how to build trust across cultures between people who have been born and grown up in different parts of the world, who see the world through the lens of their own culture and experiences. Communication and awareness of differences are critical to any future trust building that may be undertaken, since without an appreciation that everyone is different, then trust becomes difficult for all. Progress is extremely difficult. So breaking down barriers means getting people with similar preferred methods of developing and maintaining trust to begin to trust one another and work well together is an important step. Awareness of differences is critical to any future trust building work that may be undertaken. Despite all the challenges, connecting and respecting others is fundamental to how we communicate with each other. So there's a lot of words there, a lot of depth in Philip's conversation, a lot for us to think about. So let's now take a few moments and enter into this meditation. And again, sit comfortably on your seat. Allow your body to relax. Let your feet rest on the floor and your hands rest on your lap. You may wish to close your eyes and gently focus your awareness on your body and breathing. Notice your breathing and follow the flow of your breath. You may begin to notice that your breath is calming down. Let your body relax. Your whole body relax. Let your breath be exactly as it is. Feel that there is nothing to do in this moment other than relax and breathe. We now take some time to listen to our inner voice. We learn to trust ourselves, the universe, and the journey. And what is will be. When was the last time you experienced a moment of self-doubt? In a world full of seemingly endless choices and information, it's natural to feel a bit overwhelmed. There are often a lot of incoming messages from outside sources about what kind of person you should be, what type of job you have, or what sort of beliefs to hold. These messages can begin to sound like an incessant, static hum in the background of one's mind. Slowly but surely silencing the natural intuition and wisdom within us all. When we feel bombarded with messages about how we should and shouldn't live, it is so easy to gradually disconnect from your authentic self. We may even feel less confident in the core of our being. We stop noticing the constant stream of inner chatter, criticism, advice from the outside world. Sometimes this experience feels like the world is pretty confusing or even a threatening place. The good news is that despite years of self-doubt, it is possible to learn how to trust yourself. During moments that lack self-trust, you may feel confused, lost, stuck. Perhaps you find yourself seeking out advice, feedback, and support from others. Over time, dwelling in this emotional place of self-doubt can chip away at your self-confidence. But you do have the power and the freedom to start making choices, to make new choices in this present moment. Building trust in yourself means choosing to adopt a mindful stance, especially during moments of emotional vulnerability. This also means willingness to feel comfortable. This is where the real change and growth take place. So let us pause here. So trust who you are. Trust yourself as a source of happiness. Everything you need. Every day is a new day. Your life is your message. And what you pay attention to grows stronger in your life. So just notice how you see yourself. No one knows you better than you know yourself. The self I am and the self you see. Look for the patterns that may challenge you. You are responsible for your own happiness. When things go wrong, and they will, the choice is yours. Mistakes and opportunities, all your experiences can turn to gold. How to reflect the common denominator, the big picture, your effect on other people. You are not the centre of the universe. The world beyond ourselves. Trustworthy for others. Know what's right about yourself. Trust yourself. Trust your intuition. Use friendships as your guide. Learn how to calm and soothe yourself. Learn how to calm that inner chatter. But most important, trust yourself as a source of joy and happiness. So let's return back to this space, opening our eyes and ready to continue with our day. And I'd like to finish with a quote from E. Cummings. We do not believe in ourselves until someone reveals that deep inside us there is something valuable, worth listening to, worthy of our trust, sacred to our touch. Once we believe in ourselves, we can risk curiosity, wonder, spontaneous delight, or any experience that reveals the human spirit. So thank you again for sharing your time with us today. Go gently with yourself and trust in yourself.
You've been watching Maroondah Love Dialogues. You can follow us on www.jansencentre.org. Thanks again for watching, and bye for now.